Okay, so the aim of today then is to talk about mainly focusing on the process of transitioning between secondary school and college. So if I go through to the sort of aims of the workshop, and as we said earlier, we'll be taking questions at the end. So we'll look at the process of actually securing a post-16 placement. But also the main bulk of the presentation will be talking about what the more practical things that can be done in preparing for a transition, and that's both for children and young people who might have an EHCP, so an education and healthcare plan, or might just be receiving SEND support through school at the moment, and wish that will continue when they move on to college. We'll also talk a bit about what schools and colleges should be doing around transitions, and there is some quite a lot of guidance for schools and colleges around that, so it's sort of making sure that does happen. Possibly putting in place a transition plan for yourselves as well, to make sure you keep track of all the activities and things that you can be doing. And then we've got a few frequently asked questions at the end, so we obviously do get a lot of people calling through to our helpline and emailing with questions around post-16 placements to college, so hopefully cover off some of those, but obviously we really welcome your questions at the end as well. Okay, so are the slides moving? Can you see the next one now? Hopefully you can. I'll just keep talking anyway, but what I wanted to touch on first was
sorry Lisa, it's still on the first slide.
Okay, hold on a mo. See if I can do anything to change that. Has that done anything?
Not on my screen. Pippa, are you still seeing the front screen as well?
Yep, we're still stuck on the first slide.
Okay, apologies, I'm not very familiar with Zoom. Maybe come out of it. End the show. Okay, so that's come pulled down. Has a try again.
Oh, it's now gone to the third slide. So I think
it has. It's now skipped down to the third slide.
It must be a big time delay.
Okay.
Shall I leave it in this view then?
Yeah.
If you can see them, I'll just leave it in this view. Yeah, I won't put it back into slideshow. Okay. So I just wanted to touch on the kind of courses that are on offer through the colleges and well, through further education colleges, and of course sixth form colleges are included in that as well. And the offering in Hampshire covers things like academic qualifications, there's vocational qualifications at all levels. Then they often talk about the work-based learning, so things like apprenticeships, traineeships, supported internships, and then it's also possible to get more bespoke packages of learning as well. And I just wanted to sort of reference the Hampshire Futures Career Service website here, because if you do want to find out more information about what's actually on offer, what sort of courses would be relevant for maybe your child or young person who has special educational need or a disability, Hampshire Futures does hold a lot of information more specific to those children and young people. So I can always put the actual link to the website maybe in the notes afterwards, but that's where you'd go to find out more information, and where the young person can go as well and find out more information about those things. So I just wanted to touch on that, but as I said, the main bulk of this will be talking more around that transition to whatever that placement ends up being. Okay, so hopefully you can see the next thing. So we do get a lot of questions around what SEND support is available in college, and if it is similar to school. And it is very clear in the guidance and the legislation that further education and sixth form colleges do have a statutory responsibility to meet the needs of young people with SEN. So just as schools have that statutory responsibility to put in place SEND support. Colleges and sixth form colleges do as well. And they do have, there should also be a very similar role to the SENCO role that you probably are familiar with in schools. Colleges should have that sort of designated person who's responsible for coordinating that SEN support as well. And there's still, you know, colleges should still be or must be using their best endeavours to meet that special educational provision that's needed. So you don't need to have an education and healthcare plan moving into a post-16 placement to get SEND support. Colleges should be providing that. So what I've put there is the actual transition activity around those who have an EHCP and those that don't is actually should be very similar in terms of what activities you can be doing around the transition, what information should be shared. The main difference is the more sort of formal process leading up to the placement. So with an EHCP, there's a more formal annual review process, which we'll go into, and also the way the placement is actually completed or decided is obviously slightly different, because with an EHCP you name a placement. With someone who doesn't have an EHCP but does need the SEND support, you would just go through the normal admission process. Okay, so as I mentioned, those who have an education and healthcare plan, really you need to be looking back to year 9. The transition activity should really be starting then in schools, and they do have this responsibility to be working quite proactively with colleges on transition planning. And you'll notice in the EHCPs there's a section around preparation for adulthood themes and outcomes surrounding that, and that's where you can start thinking about things, well, the aspirations and the abilities of the young person and what they, you know, how they should be preparing for adulthood, and maybe what kind of post-16 options would be appropriate. So really the transition process or the transition planning should really be starting around year 9. So if any of you are fortunate enough to be a few years back still, it's making sure that that does happen at the school and with the local authority. But the main point, I suppose, which most people are familiar with, is the transfer review. So again, those who have the education and healthcare plan, there's a statutory requirement for the placement to be named by the 31st of March before they start college in September. So that means that the local authority should be starting those annual reviews in the autumn term. So for those people starting this September, those annual reviews should have happened before Christmas, ready for a placement to be named in March, and then giving time for the college and the school to prepare for that transition over the summer, before that, from March really. And it's just a normal annual review process, which again, I expect most people are familiar with if their child or young person has had an EHCP for any length of time. And it should just be exactly the same in that there should be a normal review, all contributions being made by parents, young person, the school, any experts. The LA reviews that plan. Then amendments are proposed within 4 weeks of that meeting or that review process. And then you get the amended plan of placement blank. And you have those 15 days to propose any other amendments or any representations about the amendments, and suggesting, you know, asking which college placement you want, and then the plan is finalised by the 31st of March. Now, just going back to that really is the opportunity, I suppose, to make sure where EHCPs sometimes haven't been updated since a young person starting secondary school. It's really a good opportunity, if you haven't been doing it since year 9, is to make sure that that provision really is accurate, the needs are up to date, the provision is accurate, so whatever college is taking that plan will actually have a good understanding and an accurate picture of that child or young person. Okay, so I mentioned that there are certain things that should be happening for all children and young people who have SEN. And again, in the SEN Code of Practice, it does state what transition activities should be happening. So I've just sort of put the kind of the guidance in there from the Code of Practice. And it says that, you know, the school should be sharing information with the college or other settings that the young person or child's moving to, and that the school should agree with parents and pupils the information to be shared. So that's important as well, that this is just necessarily an automatic process that happens. It is a conversation with the parents and the school talking about what information would you like me to share with the college. Hopefully, most of the time you want the college to know everything, but it's just making sure that your wishes and the young person's wishes are sort of included in that. And then the college should be using that information to make sure they do have a high quality study program, or they are able to meet the needs of that child or young person when they move into that placement. In terms of what that actually looks like, so again, this is relevant for all children and young people with SEN, not just with EHCPs. So the colleges should be actively involved with that transition planning. So they should be aware of the children and young people who have SEN, and schools should be sharing information like pupil profiles or pupil passports. Sometimes children have pupil passports, school reports, provision maps that are in place, obviously the EHCP, if there is one, any relevant information around attendance or behaviour, so anything the college needs to be aware of, and any other needs like communication needs, mobility needs, and sort of special measures that they may have in place at the moment to facilitate learning, like visual aids, one-on-one support, or not one-on-one support because that normally be in EHCP, but any extra support that they get. And also what's really important is that the child's voice or young person's voice is heard and included in any of the planning, so that the school and the college understand if that child or young person is feeling anxious about the move, what they might be worried about, what support they might be worried that they might not get, all of those sorts of things. Really important to include that. As always, it should always be the centre of SEN support is the child and the young person. Here I've just gone to a bit more sort of practical things that can be considered for the transition, and things that we talk to parents about quite a lot. I suppose first of all, which probably seems quite obvious, but it's actually like which study programs. So for those children and young people who maybe you've got an EHCP and you're focusing on the placement and the named placement, it's actually understanding, okay, but what within that placement are you going to be doing? What are the courses that are the right level and the right will fit the aspirations and the abilities of that child or young person, and making sure that you've sort of done that research beforehand, whether that's through Hampshire Futures or through the school career guidance, or talking to the colleges, going to open days beforehand, all those sorts of things. And then once you've actually chosen your placement, it's thinking about the transition visits and the taster days. So they're normally done as standard, but it's working out if maybe your child or young person needs an additional visit or a visit in a much smaller group, a slightly different tailored taster day, and it's working with the college to sort of put those in place. Those are really important because college life is often very different to school life, particularly for those children who maybe be out of education and are moving into college. It's really understanding how they're going to fit in and what the reality of that is. I think sometimes I think, oh, college won't be anything like school, so I'll be okay. But actually, there's still they still need to be attending. There's still a timetable they need to follow, all those sorts of things. And it's even just becoming familiar with the structure of the programme. It's often not over a 5-day week. So again, it can be quite different to being at school. We've got some other sort of more practical things. This may not be relevant for every young person or child. It depends on their individual needs, but having photos of the building and the classrooms they'll be using, and of the college staff that they'll be coming into contact with, and just having, I know they often do this at schools, and having that over the summer so that they can sort of familiarise themselves with it, and keeping that in mind, because the summer break can be a very long break as well, as we all know as parents. But also, what does the young person need to know? So who is it that they're going to be building those relationships with? And for so many young people with SEN, it's understanding who are those trusted members of staff that they need to get to know, and how will they have to find them, where will they be? Because it's, again, probably quite different to secondary school. And the same for parents and carers. Like, who is it in the college that you need to be in contact with during the transition phase, and also later, if you need to discuss things at a later date, if you need to still be reviewing, obviously, the SEND support that's in place and in the EHCP. So who is it that has that SENCO role, and how can you contact them, and how are they going to be delivering that SEND support and the EHCP support? And lastly, just another more practical tip is how are they actually going to get there? Again, transport to college is quite different, transport to school, and they're often expected to sort of get there more on their own, and so it's working out what's the route, are they going to be getting the bus, practicing that route over the summer, those sorts of things. And then this is a little bit of a repeat of some of the things I've said, but it's actually, and again, it's probably stating the obvious for a lot of you, it's actually putting that into a plan and working out who's going to do what, who's responsible for what bit, and when. So like, how many transition visits are you going to do, and when are they going to be? What visual information might that child or young person need? Do you need to put together a transition book? Do you need to put together a personal passport like they might have at school at the moment, if that's not already going to be moved across from school to college? When are you going to have the meetings for those key people that the child and young person needs to know? Let's get them scheduled in, because you want to get all of that done before the summer holiday starts. And from March onwards, the time goes really quickly. And then another one that the team actually mentioned, which is quite good, is having a sort of backup list of courses, because of course when you're selecting your college course you might not actually get the grades, and it's understanding what other options are there, so that if you're in that situation, you can then talk to the college, or on enrolment day you can still go in and talk to them about what other courses you could potentially do with the results you have. And again, yeah, the travel options, what are the, do you need to contact the transport team and work out if there's any kind of eligibility for help, financial assistance, that sort of thing? Can you get that in place way before September? Because we all know that can take a bit of time. And most importantly, if you're feeling concerned, if your child or young person is feeling concerned about the future, about the placement, about the new college, it's making sure that you arrange that meeting with the college, a transition meeting, and just understanding what planning and support is available for your child and young person. Don't be afraid to do that, because that's what the college is. As I've said, the colleges are supposed to be engaging in that transition planning with you, particularly around children who have, special educational needs and disabilities. And we can help you prepare for those sorts of meetings. If you need further advice on that, you can get in contact with our helpline and somebody would run you through those sorts of things. Okay, the main sort of topics I want to cover, and I've just got a few frequently asked questions which I could quickly go through in case there are any questions, in case they match up with any questions you already have, and then we can open the floor to any questions that we have from the audience. So the first one, I may have actually covered this. So my child has an EHCP. Do they need to follow the normal admission process? So in many cases, the colleges do actually still require you to apply for a course, but the actual placement isn't determined by that admission process. The placement is determined through that transition review, and the placement is named on the EHCP. But obviously, colleges the child and young person still needs to meet admission criteria for the course that they're applying for. This one, what happens if your child or young person doesn't get the expected grades? Again, talking to the college, but still going to enrolment day, and because there's still that opportunity to maybe enroll on a different course, depending on how far they fall short and what their aspirations are. So don't just not go. There's still lots of other options available. Can I request an EHCP for college if they haven't needed one at secondary school? This one's quite tricky. It's sort of similar to the case between primary and secondary school, but the EHC assessment, so the Education Healthcare Assessment, is completed based on the needs of the child and young person as they stand right now, not on what might happen in the future. So it would be so if the child or young person is coping well in secondary school, you wouldn't necessarily be able to get an EHCP in place for college. It would be more around making sure you've got that careful transition plan, doing that planning with the college and making sure that the SEND support does continue. There is that transition from school to college, the information goes across, rather than worrying, oh, actually now I need to get an EHCP in place. I've just got one more slide with more questions. So I've had this one quite a bit recently. I've had a transfer review and named a college. The college have communicated with me directly to say that they can't meet need. So that's, yeah, as I said, that's not unusual. But again, what should happen? You should contact your SEND caseworker if they're not already aware of that, because they will then be able to help you work with the college to understand what it is that the college feel that they can't do, what need it is that can't be met, and the SEND team are there to help make sure the college, well, to ensure, obviously they have that legal duty if it is a placement that's named, to ensure that the college have what they need to carry out the plan. And often that will result in you having a meeting with the college and trying to resolve that. And if it isn't resolved, the SEND caseworker can then help you identify an alternative placement, alternative college that will be able to meet the need of the young person or child. Next one on there is around whether the child or young person is eligible for transport. If they've had transport to school, will they be eligible for transport to college? So there's no automatic entitlement to post-16 transport. It is quite different to school transport. Learners who have an EHCP can request transport, but they need to be attending the nearest college that is suitable to meet their needs. So then the SEND travel team then assess that sort of eligibility and work with the parent in terms of what contributions needed. So there's no sort of free travel at this point. There's always going to be some level of parent contribution, and the SEND travel team will help sort of determine that. And then the last one on here, what if things start to go wrong and my child or young person isn't attending college? And as I've said, obviously college, they do need to be attending. So as soon as you feel that things aren't working, or maybe they're not getting the support, either that's the provision that's in their plan, or if it's SEND support, the college aren't providing that, it's getting in contact with that named contact that you've already identified, hopefully as part of the transition process, and getting those discussions in earlier around what's not working, what can change, what provisions needed, what help might be needed by maybe the local authority, or so all those things. It's sort of getting in there as early as possible and working with the college to sort of improve that. Okay, so those are all of my slides. So I didn't know if we wanted to open it up for questions now. Shall I stop the screen? I think it's the one question.
There are no questions from our parents at the moment. I've made a few notes just from my experience of doing the transition from secondary to college, and friends of mine. So my child has an EHCP and a friend of mine has SEND support, and there's a difference in how we've experienced that transition. So am I right thinking that it's a school's responsibility to get the information about the young person to the college?
It's a joint responsibility. So, but are you talking about a child who has an EHCP or?
Send support really to start with. I think EHCP, because there is that official documentation, that seems
It's a bit easier.
I think the avenues for that information is there already. So I think I'm questioning really about the send support. So
yeah, it is the schools. So if we go back to the one of the slides, I know you can't see it at the moment, but so as part of the SEND Code of Practice, it does state that to support transition, the school should share information with the college and other settings. So schools should agree with parents. So it should be the school, but you know, the school should be proactive about it. But I think it doesn't harm the parent checking in with that's going to happen. Yeah.
I was just thinking whether it's possible for parents to know what information is. So you're saying that parents should agree to what information is being lost, and it's sort of when that is happening and that it actually has happened. And I think that's quite important, because I think sometimes things don't happen as smoothly as they should. And I think that you only find out that that information hasn't gone across when the wheels start coming off the bus.
Yes.
So I think that it's important to sort of parents to contact college as early as possible to sort of check that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And just like because for the children who are having the SEND support, you should be having those meetings with the school every term. And I suppose it's as you get closer to the end of that school term as well, I suppose again it's having conversation with the school then as well, saying, so what information are you going to be passing across, or what can I take and pass across? But you're right, you should be proactive with the college as well.
Yeah, and the college should listen to the parent as much as the school.
They should, yes.
And I think one of the issues that people who have on SEND support is maybe there's one person for a lot of people, and so communication can sometimes be quite difficult. One of the other things that I noted when you were talking about sort of preparing for that transition, about taking pictures and things like that, is that sometimes in colleges they have names for places that aren't the official names for those places. There's that getting that colloquial sort of naming of places, as well as this room is number 123, but we also call it the joining room or something like that, that all of the different names that are used, because I know that's tripped my son up in that sort of, when people are talking about where to go, then it sort of it means that people have got a chance. Right, I have a message. Right, would you? Yeah, so would it be possible to make the slides available so that I can pass it to the parents that are online?
Yep, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then I can make sure the links are working in the slides, like to Hampshire Futures, and there's links at the end to our website as well. Okay,
I think, so if you need to do something for that, would it be possible for, if those people that would like to have a copy of the slides, would you be able to put in your email address into the chat, and then when Lisa has made those links live, I can pop them across to you? Is that okay? Okay. Is there any other questions that anybody has?
I was just going to ask a quick question, if that's okay. So going back to, I think it was the last slide where you mentioned that there's not an automatic entitlement for post-16 transport. And if you have an EHCP, that the request can be put in for transport, but you must attend the nearest college that can meet needs. When you say can meet needs, does that include the fact that the course that the child might want to take is on a college that's further away than the college that's nearest to them? Hopefully I've said that correctly.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I know what you mean, because there's sometimes nearer colleges, but they're not always suitable for, yeah. So my understanding is, yes, it doesn't necessarily have to, it's not the closest college, it's the closest college that meets the needs of that child in terms of what course they want to do so that would fall into the aspirations of the child. So if they want to do an apprenticeship in electrical, I don't know, electrical engineer or whatever, and it's not at the closest college, it's that one further away, then that should fall into the eligibility criteria. That's my understanding anyway. I know transport can be a bit of a minefield. It's the same with schools though, isn't it? Is they, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be the nearest school, that it just has to be the nearest school that is suitable and meets the needs of that child, and you can still qualify for transport. So it's the same principles.
I'm
Brilliant.
just going to stop the recording because I know that there's a few people that are looking like they want to ask a question on directly rather than on message.